Hello everyone, this is AndresRestart, and today I would like to talk about how there have been different rumored remasters to be coming to Nintendo Switch 1 throughout this entire generation. Rumors have been backed up from credible places that many people have believed and have been waiting to see something on for years at this point, such as The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD, or The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess, or how about Metroid Prime 2 and 3 Remastered, or even F-Zero GX. And then there's another one that isn't technically rumored, at least not from credible places, but has been one that we've talked about a lot because it made so much sense to be included in Super Mario 3D All-Stars back in 2020 for the 35th anniversary, but it wasn't, and that's Super Mario Galaxy 2. What's going on with these different Nintendo games that made so much sense to come to Switch 1, but have not shown up yet? Well, looking at some of the recent happenings when it comes to Nintendo, it seems like we may have a better understanding of what may be showing up in the Switch 2 Direct. There have been some different things that have apparently been leaked, or at least information about projects that Nintendo probably didn't want us to know about quite yet, and this could be helping to paint an overall picture for a Switch 2 Direct that I think may be granting us a little bit of a better understanding for what may be going on for some different Nintendo remasters we've been waiting such a long time for, and that's what I want to dive a bit further into today. But before going forward, let me take this moment to point out that I am aiming to reach 50,000 subscribers by the time the Switch 2 launches, so if you find yourself enjoying my content, I would appreciate it if you could subscribe and hit that notification bell. So there are 4 different things going on that I think may help to explain why we've been missing these 6 different potential remasters for Switch 1. The most recent story that we've talked about is how apparently Nintendo Gamecube could be coming to Nintendo Switch Online for Switch 2, and we may be seeing an announcement of this in the Switch 2 Direct. Now, if you missed yesterday's video when I talked about this, or if you haven't seen it reported by other places already, let me briefly explain what's going on. Basically, there's an FCC filing that's popped up, and when it comes to FCC filings in Nintendo, when we see them from Nintendo just a few weeks later, there is an announcement of this product. One really good example is Nintendo Alarmo just a few months ago. But with this particular FCC filing, what we have observed is that this is a product with the product code BEE, which is for Switch 2 and not HEC for Switch 1, which means it has to do with Switch 2. We know it's a controller of some kind, but it does not have NFC technology. In other words, it's probably not a Pro controller, it's probably not the Joy-Cons, so it's some other type of weird controller for the Switch 2. We did have a lot of different controllers for NSO on Switch 1, which also didn't have NFC technology, so maybe this is what it is, a controller having to do with Nintendo Switch Online, but for Switch 2. And there is imagery within this filing that shows that where the labeling is where it would have been on the GameCube on the rear. And so what we're looking at here seems to be the most compelling evidence we've ever gotten for Nintendo GameCube coming to Nintendo Switch Online, and because it is an FCC filing and because it has to do with the Switch 2, this seems to be something that we may see an announcement on within a few weeks, which, yes, the Switch 2 Direct is a few weeks from now. Now, obviously, this isn't guaranteed. We do not know for sure if Nintendo GameCube is coming to Nintendo Switch Online. It's just what seems most likely based off what we're seeing here. Maybe it's somehow something else. There's a good chance of that. So yes, temper your expectations. But as I just said, this is our best evidence yet for GameCube coming to Switch Online. And if this is the case, this could help to explain a lot about why we haven't seen some different Nintendo remasters. A lot of the games I mentioned earlier, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, F-Zero GX, Metroid Prime 2, these are all games that were for Nintendo GameCube. And so perhaps the reason why we heard about some of these rumors in the past is because Nintendo was indeed planning releases for these games, but maybe held off on them for whatever reason and decided it might be best to just save these projects for Nintendo Switch Online, GameCube Nintendo Switch Online. I think there could be something to that idea. And some of you might be wondering, well, okay, sure, if we got GameCube Online, we would just basically getting slightly upscaled versions of what we had on Nintendo GameCube, so it wouldn't really be the same experience as Wind Waker or Twilight Princess HD. And I think that's a good point to be made. I think there's still reason to believe that maybe we still see Wind Waker and possibly even Twilight Princess in the HD remastered versions we saw for Wii U but adapted for Switch, regardless of whether we see these games come to NSO, the originals. But something to consider here is that Wind Waker and Twilight Princess HD were adapted for Wii U. They were made with dual screen technology in mind. They had maps and different things going on, and so maybe Nintendo wants to avoid that, since the Switch doesn't have a second screen. But something else I would like to throw out though is that Gamecube NSO might be more impressive than we're giving it credit for here. So when we take a look at Nintendo Switch Online currently, all the games are upscaled to HD. The games do look sharper and cleaner, and so there are improvements there with all the games emulated through NSO. But with Switch 2, what we understand is that it will be using some form of NVIDIA's technology, deep learning super sampling, which can offer a variety of improvements including higher resolutions and ray reconstruction, and so through DLSS, games can look and run significantly better. Might it be possible that Nintendo might be going back to these different GameCube games and using DLSS technology to improve upon them? So in a sense, Nintendo's going to go back and remaster all these games a little bit. I'm not saying dramatically, but it might be more of an improvement than some people are expecting here. And so that might also mean Nintendo is very selective with the GameCube titles that do come to NSO. When we look at N64 NSO, there aren't as many games as there are for NES or Super NES. So there may be a bit of a trend there, and there may be less on GameCube, but over time, we'll get some, and each of these GameCube games has a little bit more effort done to enhance it for this NSO offering. And so if there's something to this idea, when we're talking about seeing remasters for F-Zero, Wind Waker, Twilight Princess, and Metroid Prime 2, they might look noticeably better than they did for their original releases on Switch 2 NSO. And so this could possibly explain why Nintendo hasn't put them out yet, because they are being saved for Gamecube NSO. But Gamecube NSO would not explain for why we haven't seen Metroid Prime 3 or Super Mario Galaxy 2. Now I'll throw out this idea. What if it's not just Gamecube NSO, but also Wii NSO? The way the Joy-Cons work on Switch 1, and by extension probably also the Joy-Cons on Switch 2, because they seem to have all the same technologies, just a little bit more, save for the infrared camera, which is not needed here. Simulating Nintendo Wii controls is pretty easy to do, so they may not even need a Wii controller for that NSO offering, although of course they can still add that as well. And Nintendo could come out with both GameCube and Wii NSO, and if that's the case, then guess what? All 6 games we've mentioned, in theory, could be added in that way. But while currently GameCube NSO may seem pretty likely, even if it is coming, that isn't necessarily why we haven't seen these remasters yet. But there are other things to consider here. For example, we've heard that Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is going to be in the Nintendo Switch 2 Direct from Kiwi Talks, who is someone who interviews a variety of different developers, including ex-Retro Studios developers, so they are seemingly well connected. But to say Metroid Prime 4 will be in the Switch 2 Direct, that alone isn't that crazy. However, what else is being said is that Metroid Prime 4 is going to be a big deal. In the opinion of Kiwi Talks, perhaps the biggest deal of the presentation is going to blow everything else out of the water. Now, I think that is somewhat opinionated, but whatever they have heard has led them to say that, which may mean that Metroid Prime 4 at the very least is going to have a significant focus. And so how might this relate to Metroid Primes 2 and 3? Well, basically, this just helps to fuel the idea that starting April 2nd, that's when Nintendo's going to really start kicking things into gear when it comes to marketing Metroid Prime 4 Beyond. And we have thought that Metroid Prime 2 and 3 have been saved in the lead up to Metroid Prime 4, that as we get closer, they would be put out. And so if they haven't really been pushing marketing Metroid Prime 4 yet, because they've been waiting for the big Switch 2 campaign to begin, because Metroid Prime 4 is a big part of it, then that's probably why they haven't brought out Prime 2 and 3 yet. And so once they start talking about Prime 4, 2 and 3 could come out. Maybe it is through Gamecube NSO, or maybe it is individually somewhat similar to Prime 1 Remastered. Of course, when we go back to the Prime 1 Remaster rumor from Jeff Grubb, he told us that that would be the big boy remaster, and that 2 and 3 wouldn't get as much work done. So I am tempering my expectations a little bit with this, which means maybe they would make more sense just to come to Gamecube NSO, but there also could be a little bit of a middle ground here where they do see some more substantial improvements that would go beyond something like a NSO offering and still could be worthwhile as its own releases on the Switch eShop and hopefully a physical release as well. I will put out this reminder that there is a Metroid Prime 3 1-3 visual retrospective that is coming out in June. This is an official art book here, and so it might be the case that late June is our deadline for Primes 2 and 3. They may want those games out by the time the art book releases. But here's our next consideration. Perhaps the reason why we haven't seen Wind Waker or Twilight Princess yet has more so to do with the fact that Nintendo is trying to balance out which Zelda releases they put out when. And yes, Nintendo did skip 2022 because they delayed Tears of the Kingdom, and that may have been the best opportunity to put out Wind Waker and or Twilight Princess. But maybe they just stopped because of how big Tears of the Kingdom was going to be, that it was fine just to wait a few more months there, and they don't actually have to have literally a Zelda release every single calendar year. And so they could still be saving these for just a little bit later on. And maybe the reason why we haven't seen them announced yet is because Nintendo has another Zelda remaster in mind. We've talked about how there are leaks for an enhanced version of Breath of the Wild for Switch 2. 2 leaks, actually. One of them goes back to the reports from 2023 of the Switch 2 technical demonstrations. One of them was about an enhanced Breath of the Wild. And then another goes back to last year where we got the different codenames for Midori, some of which have already been confirmed, such as Edward for Echoes of Wisdom, Banquet for Super Mario Party Jamboree, and the codename for Switch 2 itself, Ounce. But one of those other codenames that came out for Midori was Yu-King O. Yu-King was the codename for Breath of the Wild. The O would stand for Ounce, the codename of Switch 2, the implication being that this is a Breath of the Wild Switch 2 remaster that is in the works. And so it may very well be the case that during the Switch 2 Direct, or at least sometime early on for the Switch 2 era, Nintendo wants to announce an enhanced version for Breath of the Wild, and if they have plans like this, they may be prioritizing that before they provide Wind Waker and or Twilight Princess HD. Of course, I would argue that you could put out a Breath of the Wild remaster, but I don't think it really would be that big of a deal, and also provide Wind Waker for Switch 1 owners. That way Switch 1 owners still have something to enjoy as we transition over to Switch 2. And maybe that could still happen a little bit later down the road, or maybe it just happens through Gamecube NSO. Something I'd like to point out is that while we have seen evidence for Gamecube NSO coming to Nintendo Switch 2, this controller theoretically could also be compatible with Switch 1. It's not guaranteed that Gamecube NSO would only be coming to Switch 2. Although personally, I do lean in that direction, because it feels like they'd want to provide enhancements to give people more reasons into picking up a Switch 2. Now, this final consideration here isn't necessarily a leak, but it is widely believed that 3D Mario is going to be part of the Switch 2 Direct. I mean, actually, there have been rumors that, yes, 3D Mario will be part of the Switch 2 launch campaign or early times, which isn't really a crazy thing to say because 3D Mario is always out in that first year for every new generation of Nintendo. But we've also seen that Mario Kart is in the Switch 2 reveal trailer, and it is Mario's 40th anniversary later this year. And so it does have me thinking about what happened back in 2020 for the 35th anniversary. The 35th anniversary, there was a big 35th anniversary direct in September, in time for the literal day of the anniversary for Mario, Super Mario Bros. And there were a variety of games announced, including Super Mario 3D All-Stars, Mario 64 Sunshine and Galaxy, a release that many people noticed was missing Galaxy 2. But 3D All-Stars was a limited release. You can't get this on the eShop, it's no longer for sale. And so if you want to get these games and you never picked up 3D All-Stars beforehand, you might have a lot of trouble being able to do so. So there has been a thought that maybe eventually Nintendo would re-release these different games separately outside of 3D All-Stars. And since they are all done through an emulator, some have thought maybe this could be tying into emulation for GameCube and Wii games, since we had Sunshine, a GameCube game in 3D All-Stars, and Galaxy, a Wii game in 3D All-Stars. Which brings me back to the whole Gamecube NSO thing. Maybe with Gamecube NSO, this could be an opportunity to go back and re-release Sunshine and re-release Mario Galaxy, assuming they also add Wii NSO, And then also, because it is Mario's 40th anniversary, perhaps this is a time to revisit other Mario releases that we didn't see quite come out, and that could include Galaxy 2. And something I will point out specifically about Galaxy 2 that might make some interesting sense regarding the 40th anniversary is that Galaxy 2 is the game that has Yoshi. And we know at the end of the Mario movie, Yoshi was teased. So there is a strong belief that with the next Mario movie coming out next April, so April 2026, likely when Nintendo will be finishing up their 40th anniversary celebrations, because the 35th anniversary celebrations also trickled into the early parts of the next year, Yoshi is going to be a big part of that movie, and so it might make sense to have some games that also involve Yoshi. Not to mention that 2025 is also the 35th anniversary for Yoshi, because Yoshi's first debut was in Super Mario World, which released in 1990. So Super Mario Galaxy 2 is actually a really good fit to celebrate both Mario's 40th anniversary, Yoshi's 35th anniversary, and tie into some other bigger Mario releases and the big Mario movie that may also have Yoshi in a starring role. And so all these different things that seem to be going on could explain for why we haven't seen these different Nintendo remasters. But another possibility I will mention is that it's just because Nintendo has simply chosen not to yet. There is no particular reason, they just didn't think it was a good time yet, but they still may eventually see the light of day. Some have thought that maybe with F-Zero GX Remaster, we're just not going to get a GX Remaster, and instead, eventually, we're just going to see the next brand new F-Zero game. Of course, if Gamecube is coming to NSO, I would love to see GX at least through that, and then eventually, we'll get a brand new F-Zero on Switch 2. I'd much rather get a new game and see a re-release of GX than just get a remaster of GX. But what do you all think? What do you make of these different Nintendo remasters that people have been expecting throughout the Switch 1 era, but haven't quite come out yet? Do any of the recent things going on with Switch 2 give you some belief we could see them relatively soon? Let me know in the comments below. This is AndresRestart. Thank you so much for listening and watching, and I'll see you all really soon. Take care. Bye.